So yeah, here we are in the Lovettsville Union of Churches Cemetery. As Anne-Marie alluded to, in the early 19th century, there's going to be a massive change in how cemeteries are laid out and how they're used. In 1834, the cemetery of Mount Auburn outside of Boston is created, and it is the first rural or garden cemetery in the world. Again, the idea is instead of just being a place where the dead are buried, the cemetery is going to become a place that serves a number of functions. It's obviously going to be a resting place for people. It's going to be a place for reflection. It's going to be a place to kind of enforce ideas of civic values, religious values, and it's going to be a place for art, public art displays. It's really the start of this massive movement that's going to sweep the nation. Mount Auburn becomes the biggest tourist attraction in the United States in the 1830s and 40s. Cemeteries of this style are going to pop up in every major city. Think of Hollywood Cemetery in Richmond as a perfect example, or Rock Creek Cemetery in Washington, D.C. Even small communities like Lovettsville are going to create these rural cemeteries, but on a smaller scale. You know, it's not going to be as grandiose or as heavily landscaped, but you still have those elements that Anne-Marie pointed out. The plantings, the pathways, recreational buildings. This is a place for people to come and spend time. Now I want to take a moment to kind of focus on some of the art. You see an explosion of different styles, different symbols that start appearing in funeral art. We've got some really good examples that are just right around me now, so I want to take a look at some of them. This stone for Charlie Williams is a really fascinating piece. It stands out. As you can see, the central motif is a tree, but it is a tree that has been cut short. You know, the limbs have been shorn, the top has been cut off. Oftentimes you will see a cut tree or a tree stump, or sometimes a broken column that represents kind of a life cut short. You know, that they did not enjoy their full time here on earth. There's a lot of other really cool elements built right into this stone. Down at the bottom you see ferns. Some historians and experts consider the fern as a symbol of humility, a symbol of perseverance. And then around on the side we see a very obvious symbol here, the Holy Bible, obviously the symbol of someone who's lived a religious life. But we can take a look at some of the other stones here that I think are particularly interesting. We're going to walk on over to this one here. Again, we see the tree stump, the symbol of a life cut short, particularly fitting because in this case this is a child's grave. Another symbol that you often see on children's graves in the 19th and early 20th centuries is the lamb. Obviously a symbol of innocence, a symbol of youth, a symbol of a life cut short, an innocent who died before their time. We're going to see some more abstract symbolism here with this comfort grave here. In the 19th century, this rise in garden cemeteries also really coincides with a rise in kind of the exotic revival art movement. So you're going to see exotic symbols typically taken from ancient Egyptian art or Roman and kind of classical art, and that's going to start appearing in cemeteries. The most famous symbol of this is, of course, the obelisk, you know, the pointy kind of Washington Monument shaped symbol. You will see those in American funeral art. This is kind of based on an obelisk. It's kind of a squat obelisk. But these kind of papyrus-shaped columns at the bottom, again, that's all very indicative of that Egyptian revival that you'll see. Another thing that we can learn from cemetery art is perhaps people's affiliations or things that they enjoyed during their lifetime, and we had a really good example of that right over here, if I remember correctly. Right?
Yeah.
This guy here, yeah. On this side, if Anne-Marie can bring the camera on around. One of the most obvious symbols that you'll see in cemeteries of this age, this is obviously a symbol of Freemasonry. Freemasons were just one of dozens and dozens and dozens of fraternal organizations during this time. So you will also see a number of abbreviations and other symbols relating to people's fraternal organizations. There are dozens of guides to cemetery art, cemetery symbolism. Each one of them is very different. Obviously, there's no hard and fast rules for what some of these symbols mean. One guide that I am going to shout out because I do find it pretty useful, again, not 100%, but has a good listing of those fraternal symbols, symbols of flora and fauna, religious symbols. Is this book here, Stories in Stone, so it's a good one to keep with you. Another book that I cannot recommend enough is Lynette Strongstad's Graveyard Preservation Primer. This is a publication put out by the Association for Gravestone Studies. This is the go-to book on the best practices for preserving a cemetery, preserving the stones, recording the people who are buried in the cemetery. You will find it all in this book. And again, that's the Association for Gravestone Studies, great organization that does a lot to increase awareness of best practices for cemetery preservation. So we're going to cut it off there, and we will come back to you from another cemetery